A clean-up woman is a woman who gets.
Good evening. Welcome to another exciting program of the Queen's Grapevine. This is your host, Wallingford Lee. Tonight on the Queen's Grapevine, we want to talk about all the issues facing black women in America today. What are we talking about when we're talking about issues facing African American women? The issues facing them in terms of the job market, growth, in terms of socially, sexually, health-wise, and also as being a mother. So we want to take this opportunity to talk about these type of issues facing African American women because we think it's extremely important to have a conversation about these matters. While the big stations give you 2 or 3 sound bites and these type of things, this is a community program that deals with community issues that affect you, your brothers, your sisters on a daily basis. So the Grapevine is the real deal, and we want to take this opportunity on behalf of the Grapevine to thank our special guest who has been kind to accept our invitation to talk about these matters. I'm talking about Professor Mary Phillips right here at Lehman College. Welcome to our program.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that we've done various programs, and like I said to you in a previous program, that all our programs that we've done with you have been very well received. The program that you did with you about Maya Angelou, I mean, you blew everyone out of the water with that. That was a great program. We also did a program of a black family moving from the South up north to Chicago, Cincinnati, and to New York. So all of these programs have been very important programs. So, we want to talk about these issues that are facing women today, and what better person like you, an educated person, to talk about this. What are some of the issues you think that are facing African American women that are extremely important?
With some of the critical issues that are facing black women, when we talk about issues of sexism, right, very critical issue that's affecting black women living in a patriarchal society. There's other issues such as structural racism that is affecting black women as well, institutional racism. In addition to health issues that are affecting black women, right? So there are numerous issues on many different levels that affect black women in multiple ways.
And all of them are important, and all the issues that you mentioned are very paramount because they're things that we were dealing with before, and we're still dealing to them in today's society, and they're very important. Let's talk the job, and then we'll get into the social part of it. How important is the job market with the African American woman? Are there possibilities of growth? Are they penetrating the professional field, the educational field, the banking field, the Wall Street of the world? Are they penetrating these markets? And if they are not, why? Are there opportunities in other markets?
I would say that black women are penetrating these markets, but there's a lot of barriers in these markets as well. There still exists a glass ceiling, if you will. But you do have black women that are at higher levels in some of these markets, but not enough and not a lot, right? And so you may have a particular company that may have a staff of 300 that may only have maybe about 2 or 3, if that many, black women on staff, right? Very few black women as CEOs or one of these companies. They definitely exist.
But they're limited.
Yeah, I would definitely say that they're limited, and I definitely would say that there's a glass ceiling and there's structural barriers that make it difficult, right? And one of those is the wage gap, right, where black women do not make as much as men, or women in general don't make as much as men, right? Structural violence in the workplace. You have issues of sexual assault, sexual harassment that black women oftentimes have to deal with, bullying, right? All of these key issues, play a role.
Which is part of the fiber of what goes on in America. When we talk about that there's not a lot, is it because of a racial issue, or is it because these professional black women are not competent? What is your interpretation?
Oh, they're definitely competent and they're
Okay.
definitely highly educated. I will argue that it's due to structural racism, right? And it's due to racial biases, right? That has a lot to do with hiring practices, that has a lot to do with how black women are treated in the workplace. And so it's not an issue of competency or
The competence
education.
is there.
Absolutely.
But how do we overcome that if they're semi-racist behavior who keep them in the background? How do we fight that? How do we knock that down?
Yeah, I think it's an issue of knowing, of tapping into your resources. It's the issue of knowing the structural hierarchy and the reporting system, right? It's the issue of developing communities. I always advocate developing your own supportive community. That is essential, and developing survival strategies, right? I have heard of different colleagues or what have you that will, for example, say they have to go meet with a doctor, right? They will go with someone to meet with this doctor or to meet with this attorney. Why? Because now you have an additional witness, right? So if you are experiencing any racism or any kind of unjust, what have you, you have a
somebody sitting
witness,
there with you.
right?
Exactly.
And so those are the kind of things that we have to do, black women have to do to protect ourselves and for our own health and well-being.
Interesting. Well, you talk a little bit also about sexual harassment, how prevalent that is in the job, because we know years back sexual harassment was a terrible thing. Women were being abused, black, white, oriental, by the behavior of certain professional men or managers. How widespread is that today?
I would argue that it's still as widespread as it was back then, right? It's a very real issue that black women and women in general experience on a daily basis. Sexual harassment, sexual assault, getting talked to inappropriately, having to prove your worth is very real. And it happens in mass, and sometimes it's unreported, right? Because sometimes
They're afraid of the
women
job.
are afraid of the backlash that may come with it, right? And so I would argue it's still a major issue.
Well, one of the things that came up in a couple of corporate conversation that I've seen on TV, some bosses claim that professional black women are misunderstood. I still don't understand what that means. You ever heard that expression before, that they are misunderstood?
That black women are misunderstood.
right.
I think I haven't heard that expression, but I think if black women are misunderstood, it's because they don't want to understand black women, right? And the concerns or the needs or the issues that they bring to the forefront. I think, there is strategic ways in which black women are not being heard, right? And that may be due to patriarchy or sexism, right?
I don't think there's
Yeah.
any misunderstood at all. I think that black women are a professional, and like any other human being, they want to make it. So they're not misunderstood as much as they will confront their boss about promotion, and they or he might think it's a misunderstanding. There's no misunderstanding. If you've done the job, you should be promoted. I think that's a silly and poor excuse that they come up with.
Right. That's what I'm saying. Is these folks that are in power, oftentimes white men who are in power, if they are saying this, that black women are misunderstood, it's because they are strategically trying not to understand them and really listen to what they're saying.
What do you think is the real passion of our sisters out there in terms of growth, in terms of logic? What do you think their real passion is that they're looking for or want to achieve?
Well, I think success, survival, really wanting our communities to grow and thrive, right? Really wanting to advance black communities, really wanting to balance it all, right? And really, help our communities in many different ways, right? I think that's the passion, right? Survival and leadership.
Well, one of the things that under research that we did, we came up with quite a few health matters. Let's talk a little bit of health matters, not necessarily in these, but I'll name a couple of fields, and then we can talk about it and break them down. There's a lot of health issues that are affecting our sisters and a lot of women out there. One would be heart disease, diabetes, HIV, and other complications. Where does the Black family, as far as women, stand on these health issues?
Well, I think Black women and the Black family are affected by these health issues in huge ways, right? At much more alarming rates than in other communities, right? One thing that we should also talk about that I think will also affect Black women in the workplace that's related to health issues is how racism, right, affects our health. Right, stress. Right, it really adds this stress. Right, subtle forms of racism, overt forms of racism. Right, it raises our cortisol level. It adds unnecessary stress. Right, and can affect us, Black women, particularly in many ways. Preterm deliveries. Right, because of the daily realities of racism on the body. Ongoing, absolutely, on the body. So I think when we talk about these health issues, racism, and there's many physicians that are looking at this now, but racism is a structural issue. That is a health issue that's affected us in negative ways.
And it's a big one, obviously. What about HIV? How much education do we have in the Black community about HIV?
Yeah, well, I think it's a lot of education around HIV, right? Even if we look at, for example, one of the most popular channels in the Black community is BET, right? They have done a lot of, they have done a lot of education around or public advertisements around getting tested, and I remember they had this campaign some time ago called Wrap It Up or what have you. So I do think that there is education around HIV, right? There was one young woman back when I was in college who would go on speaking tours. Her name was Ray Lewis Thornton, and she has books out. I would encourage the viewers to look her up, but she had HIV, AIDS, and she talked about how she got this. And the reason why she would go on these speaking tours, because I think there was this conception, or perception, I should say, that it wouldn't happen to me, right? And so, you know, it was something about seeing this Black woman, right? And her saying, you know, look, I got HIV, and this is how I got it, right? And then, you know, Irvin Magic Johnson, that was a huge thing when that happened as well, and then Eazy-E when that happened, right? And so I do think there's some awareness around it. Of course, there needs to be more, but I do think there's education happening.
Well, I think when Magic Johnson had it brought the biggest attention that HIV could have ever brought. No one expected a guy like him to have it. Happy marriage, great basketball play, and a wonderful person also who cared and was committed to the community. So when this hit us, I think it hurt all of America. But one thing it did do, it forced the medical field to find solutions for this. And today, I think if each or any person have HIV, they have a possibility of living if it's caught early. Because I remember before Magic Johnson, anyone that had HIV was 5-6 months and they were gone. So I think, as you mentioned, there's a big education about it, and things have really changed. All right, as we continue talking about these things that affect our sisters in the community, it's important that you know that there is help out there if you seek it. We'll be right back in the Queen's Grapevine.
Philosophy professor Angela Davis admitted that she is a member of the Communist Party.
Hoover put her on the top 10. Everybody had a file on her.
Her first lecture drew 2,000 students.
Angela's education is now being put into practice.
Angela Davis purchased 4 guns.
There is a conspiracy in the land. It's a conspiracy to wipe out the Black community as a whole.
Well, I think she's trying to overthrow our system of government, and she admits that.
The actions of the FBI in apprehending Angela Davis, a rather remarkable story.
A U.S. District Court judge set bail at $100,000.
She knows that the movement to free all political prisoners is growing every day.
This entire incident was a deliberate provocation.
They wanted to break me. They wanted me to respond.
There was enormous feeling for Angela everywhere in the world.
We know that she is innocent.
We want to tell that Pharaoh in Washington to let Angela Davis go free.
What they're doing to her is an exaggerated form of what happens every day to black people in this country.
What does it mean to be a criminal in this society?
They are not going to kill her. They're not going to imprison her. We're going to free her. We're going to win her freedom.
Power of nonviolence at work in the healing and reconciliation that has taken place at this convention. Governor Dukakis, I want to commend you for conducting your campaign on a consistently high plane and spirit. I come to this convention tonight to remind you that this is what the dream is all about. I come also to remind you that for many Americans, the dream is still deferred, despite the progress of the last 25 years. Something is still wrong when 32 million Americans are living in poverty in the richest nation on the face of the earth, and something is very wrong when nearly 13 million of them are children. This is a national disgrace. We cannot allow this to go unchallenged. As Americans, let us take the challenge of making those whom the Bible calls the least of these, victims of AIDS, the poor and the homeless, a top priority. Let us not abandon the victims of neglect. It would be tragic, a tragic mistake, to attract the haves to any political party at the expense of the have-nots. We can feed our hungry. We can provide decent housing for all of our citizens. We can provide jobs, skills, training, and daycare for the poor and unemployed so that they can put bread on their own tables. We can help every American who wants to work to be productive to do so. We can end the violence of nuclear war, apartheid, racism, joblessness, terrorism, drugs, and the violence in our homes, in our schools, and in our streets, if only we can find the will, and we must. And finally, my brothers and sisters, we can be proud of our economic prosperity and the blessings of freedom. But if we want to be, and if we want the gospel of freedom spread and human rights throughout the world, we must lead by our moral example. We can and we must be peacemakers. I ask you, my friends, please do not forsake Martin's dream. And I join with Jesse Jackson in appealing to you to keep hope alive. I challenge you to remember the dream.
And we're back here in the Queen's Grapevine, this beautiful program that we're doing, talking about issues facing African American women today. We think this is important because we're talking about their professional background. We're talking about a woman as a mother, a woman as a professional woman, and we're talking about also the education. We talked a little bit about the first 10 or 15 minutes about health matters that affect women on the job, whether it be stress, HIV, in some cases diabetes, and how to go about getting help. So, you know, we find that these type of programs are not boring, but actually important and educational. We're more than happy to have our special guest who have, once again, has been so kind to provide our thought process, our understanding, and our educational level here in the Queen's Grapevine. My special guest, Ms. Mary Phillips, who has been once again kind enough to be in our program and to help us out, to get the word out to you, the community, for you to be informed of the pros and cons of certain things that are extremely important in your life and will continue to be important in your life today, tomorrow, and down the road. Mary, one thing that we wanted to talk a little bit about is how does the media present the professional African women, American women today?
Ooh, you know, that's a heavy question.
That's a big one.
That's a heavy question, and we have several. Well, I would argue that there is some of these images that of the professional Black women that I would argue are complicated and problematic both at the same time in some ways, right? We have some wonderful shows out there that are really, in which Black women are behind these shows and are really trying to recreate the way in which Black women has historically been represented. But I think at the same time, some of these images, you know, cater to the ways in which Black women have been characterized historically, right? Or some of these stereotypes, right, have been perpetuated in the media. Different images in which Black women are still being locked into. But I don't think that's always on the part of the people that are behind it, but indeed the studio makers, you know, the folks that are greenlighting these projects. There's only so many things that they greenlight or what have you, and so you're constantly trying to challenge, right, this larger system that you are a part of, right? So some of these images are complicated, which we want images that are complicated and that represent us in many different forms. And then some of these images just perpetuate old stereotypes, right? And
so the media continue to be responsible in terms of Hollywood and television, how we're presented sometimes?
Yeah. Okay. Absolutely. All of these conglomerates are owned by people that don't look like us, right? Even as we get in these particular spaces, right? For example, BET is owned by Viacom, you know, and so, you know, again,
BET is just the front.
Yeah.
Exactly. But, you know, there are those watching this program who are going to say, well, you know, we have Denzel Williams, we have Beyonce, we have advanced so much. What do you say to those?
Well, you know, it depends on how you look at it. I think the more you learn about Black women's history, right, and when you learn about the history of Black women in film and television, right, and you see these stereotypes that were created, these early stereotypes, and then you look at these images today, you see some of the same images, right? And I'll give you an example. There was a lot of paraphernalia, racist paraphernalia that was developed at one point. And now you go to the grocery store and you still see, for example, on your syrup, you still see Aunt Jemima. She's more modernized, but she's still there, right? And so Uncle Ben's rice, he's still there, right? And so some of these remnants are still there, right? And so if we study these images and then we start analyzing, you know, these representations on television, we see them with a new lens, right? And we see how some of the old stereotypes are just refashioned, right? And in some ways perpetuated, right?
It's scary because sometimes, as my father would say, the more it changed, the more it remained the same. I'll just say this. I think the media can do better. They should do better. I think there are highly educated sisters out there that deserve the opportunity to show who they are on television and also in the movies. But as Sister Phillips mentioned it, you still find that line that is still there, that they continue to represent us like if we're bozos, clowns, and not knowledgeable. Well, we have maybe about 2 minutes left on our program. Mary, is there a message that you would like to give to our youngsters? Because most of the program we do is to give a message to the youngsters who are coming up. Is there a message that you'd like to give them?
Yeah, and that would be to continue reading. The more you know, the more you owe, right? And really start thinking outside the box. I would encourage, when we talk about media, to not accept everything as surface value, right? To think about what is not being said, what is not being asked. Always question, always interrogate, right? When you see these representations, right? Really try to think through these representations in a critical way, and really,
process.
Really process what you are taking in, right? And I would encourage you to take classes on the history of blacks in television or blacks in the media, and so you can start kind of making connections.
On that positive note, we want to take the opportunity to say to Mary, thank you so much for being our special guest and for imparting these words of wisdom to the youngsters. To you, my audience, I'll say, especially the youngster, instead of just using the internet for games, research the background of who you are. Research the history, the black history, so you know what our ancestors went through, why you have the opportunity that you do have right now, and why you should take care of that opportunity to go to a higher ground. You need to know the Rosa Parks of the world, the Martin Luther Kings, and even those before him that have made a difference. And to those who immigrate to this country, who sometimes are prejudiced against black people, know that the brothers and sisters set the footstep for those advantages that you do have tonight. So again, this is Wallingford Lee saying good night for the Queen's Grapevine. I hope that you have watched this program and it has been to your liking. Good night.